This video is about changing a pool filter tank, sand tank. Now, I've already done this job, so I'm going to try to quickly show you what I did. This here is the old tank. I put it here, I saved it instead of throwing it out, so that the wastewater comes out here, goes into this tank, is held there, and then I just unscrew it here at the bottom to drain it. That way I get a slow drain on the tank instead of the water just gushing all over and flooding everything. So, and also on this new tank, this is the new tank, I wrapped it in a tarp and just pinned it together in the back with clothespins. And the purpose of this is keeping the sun off the tank, because the South Florida sun really is hard on the tank. First place, this tank only lasted 3 years, and it split on the seam here. That's why I had to change it. But I had no cover for this tank. Now I have a cover, and hopefully it'll last quite a bit longer than 3 years by keeping the sun off it. Also, a long time ago I made a lid from tabs, chlorine tabs, and I put over the valve. And the purpose of that is to keep the sun off the valve. I've already lost one valve from the sun, so this is shading that. Anyways, this is a Hayward 24-inch tank that I ordered, and they were identical, and the valves are identical. Now, I had a leak in the tank, but I had no problems with the valve. The tank I purchased came with the tank and the valve. Now, if I wanted to reinstall the tank and the valve, then I would have had to cut all this piping off and repipe it. I didn't want to do that work, especially since there was nothing wrong with the old valve. So what I did, there's a couple of screws in the back here. Now, I have to mention also, make sure you have the valve on backwash, and you have this filter opened up. This screening here, this opened up so that you don't get any pressure when you disassemble this tank. So there's a couple of screws here, there's a screw on the other side. You take that off, and what I did is I lifted it up, there's no problem lifting it up, and put a board underneath to hold it up. Then now this tank is full of sand, and I wanted to save the sand. Now you can reach in and, well, of course I had to drain this also, but you can reach in and scoop it out a little bit at a time to get the sand out, which is very labor intensive, and plus you're just bent over this hole all the time getting the sand out. So what I did is I rocked this tank back and forth until it was down here on the ground. Then I used a little hole that fit in this hole here and raked out the old sand into a bucket. And as I had this tank, the old tank, over here, and what I did was I took the new tank and positioned it underneath this valve and lined it up and dropped this back in. In the meantime, I had the tank laying down here, and I was taking the sand out. So I'd take the sand out of the tank, and I didn't want to go buy 6 bags of 50-pound new sand and hassle with that. So what I did is I scooped the sand out of the old tank, which was laying down here, into a bucket, and then the new tank, which was standing up over here, I poured it in there until I got all the sand out of the old tank and put it in the new tank. I figured that in 3 years my sand was going to be worn out. So I filled that back up with sand and put water back in the tank, dropped this valve back down. It has a rubber gasket that goes around it, and I made sure that the surfaces were clean and put a little petroleum jelly on the rubber sealing surfaces so it mates up good, and I put it back down and then reassembled these 2 screws. Now I was all set because I kept this old piping, which I didn't have to cut off. And basically that is the job for changing the tanks. So the main benefit out of it is I got the old tank, and I put some screening on top of the hole so that critters won't fall into the tank and not be able to get out. And then when I backwash, the water comes out of here, goes into the tank, but before that I take this screen off so the water doesn't splash around. And that is quickly of how to change a Hayward 24-inch sand filter tank, pool sand filter tank.